Tony Bennett seemed like the nicest guy in music. He worked with everyone from Lady Gaga to Frank Sinatra. But behind those smiling photos was a dark secret.
Tony Bennett seemed like the nicest musician I've ever met. He did work for Frank Sinatra and Lady Gaga, but there was a dark secret behind those happy pictures. He hated one singer so much that it took up space in his life every day. His best friends didn't even know the truth. Bennett finally spoke out when he was very sick and about to die in 2021. This wasn't just jealousy at work. This was private and angry, and it had been kept secret for more than 50 years. Anthony Dominic Benedetto was born at St. John's Hospital in Long Island City, Queens, on August 3rd, 1926. His family had always had home births, so this was the first time anyone had been born in a hospital. It was a small but important change for this Italian immigrant family. These people came from Italy to find a better life. But what they found in New York was poverty and a lot of trouble all the time. Their Astoria apartment was crowded and cold, and the coal stoves didn't do much to keep them warm. Food was never a given, and Tony remembers that in those days, a hot meal wasn't always a given. Tony's dad was a grocery store owner in Astoria and worked long hours, but his health was bad. He had a serious heart problem because he had been poor and worked for years, and because they didn't have life insurance, every failure was hard on the family. People in the neighborhood knew the Benedettos for how strong they were, but they also saw how John's illness and the constant need for money made the family almost break apart. A terrible thing happened in 1936 when Tony was only 10 years old. 70 years ago, John Benedetto passed away. Anna was left to take care of Tony, his older sister Mary, and his brother. That was John Jr. The city was already on edge because of the Great Depression, and now the family was even poorer than before. It took Anna a long time to finish each piece of clothing she worked on in a sweatshop where she was paid very little. They always had to think about rent, and Tony remembered times when the landlord threatened to kick them out or took their furniture because they couldn't pay. They started going to soup kitchens every week. Tony's loss of his father was terrible, but it made him more compassionate and humble, and those traits never left him. In the same year, Tony went through something that made him realize how amazing his skills were. He was picked to sing at the opening of the Triborough Bridge on July 11th, 1936, when he was only 10 years old. The $60 million bridge that linked 3 areas of New York City was one of the things the city did best. A little boy stood on a huge stage and sang in front of a crowd that included Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. Afterward, the mayor even gave him a pat on the head. Tony will never forget that moment, which showed that his words could help him get through the hard things in his life. In order to help his family, he had to get a job when he was 13. A lot of Italian places in Queens and Long Island City hired him to sing while he worked as a waiter. A worn-out white jacket hung around his neck. He served pizza and pasta to the customers before getting up to sing for them. People in the neighborhood soon talked about how good his voice was, even though he was young. Most people who saw him thought he was just a bright kid, but each note he sang helped his family feed their families. Tony said that those restaurants were the best places for him to learn about people and music. The experience changed the way he naturally talks to people and taught him to be humble when things get hard. It was also clear early on that Tony was creative. He got into the School of Industrial Art in Manhattan, which is known for helping young artists learn how to paint and design. Even before he got to high school, he was known as the sharp-eyed class caricaturist for drawing teacher and students. He hoped to become a business artist while he was at the Shalish, but dreams had to wait. Tony quit school when he was 16 to help his family make ends meet. He got a job as a copyboy at the Associated Press and then worked as a cashier at a food store and an elevator operator. Even though the jobs didn't pay much, each dollar was important. He never gave up singing, even though it was hard. He put on shows at amateur nights in clubs and theaters around town, which fed a zeal that hard times could not quench. Tony was 18 years old when he was forced to join the U.S. Army in 1944. During the last few months of Wabiyufutu, he fought in France and Germany with the 63rd Infantry Division. The war was terrible, and he saw directly how bad it was. When he could, he sang with military bands, giving people who were going through terrible things a moment of peace. He will always remember the Battle of the Bulge. Almost 19,000 American troops were killed, and Tony saw friends die and villages being destroyed. He remembers how cold it was in the foxholes at night and how scary it was to be surrounded by German troops. Because of these events, he has always fought for justice and peace. Tony could really learn music after the war thanks to the GI Bill. He went to the American Theater Wing School and studied with Mimi Spear, who was his vocal coach. Everything changed after she gave me some advice. She told him to learn from instrumentalists instead of singers. Artists like Art Tatum and Billie Holiday influenced Tony, who came up with his own style. It was a smoky night in Greenwich Village in 1949, and there was music everywhere. But not many people could have imagined that one small stage would become the start of a legend. Anthony Dominic Benedetto, who went by the stage name Joe Barry, was having a hard time with his sets night after night, hoping for a chance that seemed far away. Then, Pearl Bailey walked into the Village Inn by chance. She was already famous and loved for being strong and kind. She paid close attention as he sang. The way he said it and how he felt about it stopped her in her tracks. That night, she made a choice that changed his whole life. He was asked to open her show, which put him in front of people who would finally see what she saw in him. Not only was it a nice thing to do, but it was also a brave thing to do because the entertainment world was so split after the war. Pearl Bailey not only let him use her stage, but she also met important people and put him in touch with them. One night set off a series of events that led to Bob Hope soon after. Not long after Bailey gave his support, Bob Hope sneaked into a club where Bennett was singing. Hope was one of the most famous entertainers in the United States. He could make or break lives. Bennett remembers putting all of his heart into the performance, even though he didn't know who was watching. Hope did something strange when the show was over. He joined the back room. Hope told the singer, "You have something very special. You are going to be on my show." It was a statement that not many performers ever heard. It was the moment when everything changed for Bennett. Hope asked him to open his next show at New York's Paramount Theater, which has hosted big names like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby. For a young singer who had just left country clubs, it was like going back in time. Hope had one more idea before that Paramount launch. He told him not to use the name Joe Barry. Anthony Benedetto was his real name, but it was too long for the tent. Hope came up with the idea of Tony Bennett, something short that everyone would remember. Though it was a small change, it was important. The new name opened doors in a field where a name could mean anything. Bennett would say that Bob Hope gave him that name and the chance to have a career with it. It was the Paramount shows in late 1949 that really made a difference. There were a lot of fans in the TH. It stayed there for 10 weeks, which is an amazing run that made Bennett really well known. He got a gold disc because the song sold more than 1 million copies, and putting him on TV and starting a fast-paced series of trips. People liked how sincere it was, and reviewers said Bennett brought back the classic pop ballad at a time when other styles were becoming popular. He showed how versatile he was that same year by singing Hank Williams' Cold, Cold Heart. There wasn't much of a chance that a pop singer from New York would cover a country hit, but his version did well. Gold. It was #1 for 6 weeks, and more than 1 million copies were sold. Hank Williams himself liked the recording and said it let people hear his music who had never heard it before. Bennett helped bring people from different cultures together with that song, showing that music could do that. Bennett then recorded the song that would define him for decades, which came out in 1953. It went straight to #1 on October 24 and stayed there for 8 weeks. People loved it as a song of the American dream because the words, which were about victory and hope, fit the mood of America after World War II. It became a part of popular culture when it was used in movies like Goodfellas and The Godfather years after it came out. The song sold more than 2 million copies. Bennett said it was still the song that fans asked for the most, even after all these years. After 24 songs in the top 40 by 1965, Bennett had done something that not many people could do. He stayed at the top of the charts every year with songs like Stranger in Paradise, Blue Velvet, and Just in Time. Bennett's song, When Joanna Loved Me, made it to the top of the charts even though the Beatles were the big stars of American music in 1964. This showed that he could adapt to changing times. He said had his success was due to the fact that he loved singing songs that people remembered, which was enough to keep him there. The work that Tony Bennett did with jazz greats was truly groundbreaking. During the mid-1950s, he began singing with Count Basie. This was a big change from the safe, polished pop sound that made him famous. The meetings with Stan Getz were the most risky. Getz didn't want to work with a pop singer at first, but when he heard Bennett freestyle during practice, he changed his mind. Even more people were shocked when they worked with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. A lot of people thought Blakey's hard bop style and Bennett's smooth singing would never go together, but they did. They made some of the most creative singing jazz of the time. A great cornet player named Bobby Hackett once said that Bennett was the only pop singer who could move like an instrument instead of just singing over the band. There was more to these projects than just tests. They changed him completely. And in the name of art, they put his economic success at risk. He put out a record called The Beat of My Heart in 1957. He did it to get away from the pop music machine, even though Columbia Records told him not to. Big names in jazz drumming like Art Blakey, Chico Hamilton, and Joe Jones played on the song. Each brought their own sound. The sessions were taped live with almost no extra tracks, so they capture the real jazz energy. People at first thought it was too creative and didn't like it when only 50,000 copies were sold in the first year, which isn't very many. Of course, it had a lot more of an effect than the numbers showed. On one track, Lullaby of Broadway, the singers were spread out with the band, which was pretty unusual at the time. Frank Sinatra later said he liked the record and that it taught him how to swing. Bennett and Count Basie made Basie swings the next year in 1958. Bennett sings. Basie didn't want to do it at first because he thought Bennett was too pretty for his hard-swinging band. That changed one age. The musicians had to lower the key twice so that his high-pitched voice would fit. Still, he did a version of the song that made history in just 2 takes. The rasp in his speech that day helped give it some emotional depth. It stayed on the Billboard Hot 100 for 36 weeks and got to number 19. It became his first gold record when it sold more than 1 million copies by 1963. Record of the Year was one of the awards it won, which was a big deal for a jazz-influenced song at the time. It became the official theme song of San Francisco in 1969. But things quickly changed in the music business, and Bennett's luck changed too. In 1964, when the Beatles came out, a new era began. Rock music was all the rage, and Columbia Records told Bennett he had to change with the times. He didn't want to put out Tony Sings' The Great Hits of Today in 1970. It had Beatles songs and a psychedelic cover that didn't go with his style. The project went badly. He said that just recording it made him feel sick. It didn't bother rock fans. His regular fans didn't like it, and he was stuck between 2 worlds. His once strong record sales fell apart. In a world that was screaming for something new, his sound was pushed to the side. His domestic life was also very rough. Bennett married Patricia Beach, an art student who was 19 years old in 1952. A strange scene happened outside of the wedding at New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral. There were 2,000 women in black with veils who looked like they were at a funeral. Soon after, 2 boys were born, Day in 1955 and Danny in 1954. But Bennett's constant travel made Patricia feel like she was left behind. And after 13 years of marriage, they split up in 1965. In 1969, Patricia filed for divorce, saying that he had been having an affair with actress Sandra Grant for 4 years. This made the story even worse. Her getting a divorce in 1971, Bennett married Sandra in December of that year. The quick change shocked his fans and changed his image forever. He went from being a clean-cut singer to someone else. When he quit Columbia Records in 1972 after a fight, things got worse. When they asked for more rock covers, he said no, ending a 20-year relationship. He recorded for MGM's Verve division for a short time and put out 2 albums before choosing, in 1975, to start his own label, Improv. He made 5 records, some of which were with Bill Evans, but the label went out of business in 1977 because it couldn't get the music to enough people and wasn't making enough money. For the first time, Bennett did not have a recording deal. His money fell apart. He had a lot of debt after Improv went out of style. And the way of life he and Sandra lived in Los Angeles was way too expensive for his shrinking income to support. By 1977, the IRS was threatening to take his house because he owed so much money in taxes. His mother, Anna, died that same year on Thanksgiving night while he was getting ready to play at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. The loss made him very sad, and drugs helped him get away from it all. Sandra later told them that his drug use almost killed him. He was not the same person he used to be by the late 1970s, putting on small shows in Las Vegas to make money. Bennett came very, very close to dying in 1979. He overdosed on cocaine while taking a bath because he was stressed out from debt, loss, and his drug use. Sandra found him passed out in the tub with too much water in it. She used chest compressions to bring him back to life before taking him to the hospital right away. He later said that he saw a bright light that filled him with peace and that the experience was very close to death. He thought it was a sign from God that he had been given a second chance when he woke up. It was the moment that made him decide to give up drugs for good and try to make a comeback. Tony Bennett had the worst year of his career in 1979. His DD